Yeah.
And it looks like we are live. We are going to play the intro. Welcome, everybody. I am one of your hosts tonight, Juan from the Juan on Juan podcast. And we are joined by Mark Muncy. And we will be playing this intro so everybody can come in. And here we go.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
Yeah, we're working on getting that longer, by the way. So I told Narco already to make that longer, but Narco is having his dinner right now. And we are joined by Mark Muncy. And dude, welcome to the show. This is Coquina Cowboys, a show that I do with Narco Longo. And we focus all on Florida stuff. Weird Florida, historic Florida. And there's something about Florida, right? I just told you that I did that episode with Stacy Brown Jr. Shout out to him, the Skunk Ape experiments. And we were talking about opening portals. If Florida is another dimension, what is going on? And here to tell us about some of the local lore and myths is Mark. Welcome to the show, bro.
Hey, man, it's great to be here. So it's following in Stacy's footsteps as always. So which is always fun. He's always like one step ahead of me on a podcast. So it's good though. So Stacy, when you're listening to this while you're Uber driving and you're getting mad because you're not on this episode, I'm sorry, but so if you're listening to this and your Uber driver, this handsome guy with lots of hair, is suddenly gripping the wheel a little tighter, you'll know that's Stacy Brown. So
awesome. And we have already read one of your stories on air. We did an episode actually on it, and it inspired. Yes, it did. It did pretty well. Those people can check it out. The Gnomes of Bach Tower in Lake Wales.
They're crazy, man. That was one of the craziest stories that put us on the map. That was one of the first ones that just came out of nowhere. I was running a haunted attraction at the time, and we based it all on local lore and legends. And it was out of St. Petersburg, and it was called Hellview Cemetery, because the lost cemeteries of Tampa Bay, which everybody at the time didn't know about. It was just, us historians and folklorists. And one of them was called Hillview. So of course I had to change it to Hellview for, Tales from the Crypt style for our haunted house. But we had a little email box on our website that said, email us your stories so we can put them in the haunted house. And this wonderful email came. Now, to give you internet time, this was an AOL address and a GeoCities website. So that'll kind of set your Wayback Machine a little bit. And then I got this letter from this little lady, and it was super sweet. And she was talking about how in the 1940s, she grew up on this farm outside of Bach Tower, which is, a crazy place in and of itself. It's, Iron Mountain, which, for Florida, it's called Iron Mountain, even though it's only 200 feet above sea level, but it is bigger than Space Mountain. And it has a lot of weird properties, and supposedly it was created because a meteor hit there in prehistoric times. So odd things go on there. Right near it is Spook Hill, which is our gravity hill, where you go down a small hill and then head up the big hill. But if you park in the base between the two hills and you put your car in neutral, you will go backwards up the small hill, defying gravity. It's an optical illusion, but it's one of those. It's pretty cool when you experience it. And of course, the school there is Spook Hill Elementary. So Casper the Friendly Ghost is their mascot because they embrace the weird. But the whole town, Lake Wales, where Bach Tower is, always known for this weirdness. Now, Bach Tower is a big bell tower that was created by a strange investor who bought Iron Mountain and decided he wanted to make it a tourist attraction.
Mm-hmm.
Garden of Eden, like so many that come down here, keep wanting to build the Garden of Eden in Florida. Because they're all convinced this is where it was. And this guy builds that tower. But what's cool about it is there's all these farms around it for miles. And, you are up on this hill and you're looking out over flatland so you can see for miles. And you see the tower for miles. But this little lady sent us this email saying she grew up in the Shadow Bach Tower and her farm was attacked by little people. And I'm like, What do you mean, little people? And so I emailed her back and finally gave her a call. And she was telling me this story about this night in the 1940s where her aunt owned a farm right in the shadow of Bach Tower, right behind it. And one night they were noticing all their fruit was being stolen. And they thought, oh, who's stealing our fruit? Probably fruit rats, but it could be, anybody. So they set up traps. And the traps, what they thought caught was, they thought they were going to catch fruit rats, and what they caught was a little man, naked, covered in hair. So that's why I knew it wasn't a baby. But she remembers him vividly. He was screaming at him in a language they didn't understand, caught in this rat trap, basically. Old school. So he was hurt. So they called the police, and the police show up. And they're obviously like, well, this guy is obviously not stealing your fruit. He's he's just over a foot tall. He's probably a circus performer from Ringling or something like that, because the circus is all wintered down here. So it wasn't completely uncommon to have little people in the area. So they let him go. They're like, this guy is, he's not hurting anybody. He's not too hurt. And that was it. That's a good comment. But anyway, they thought that was it. They set up more traps, and then they caught him again. And this time they caught him with an orange that was as big as him. So they called the police again. The police come and grab him, but they can't put him in handcuffs. So she vividly remembers them putting him in an orange crate to take him away, which has got to be, that one of those great visuals from a story. And they wheel him off. And that's when all hell breaks loose, because literally the orange grove comes alive and starts attacking them. These branches, oranges, rocks are being thrown at their farmhouse. She described it as being like a war zone. And when they get out there, they see there are dozens of these little people running through the orange groves, throwing stuff at them. And so that's when the police show back up. They haven't been able to translate anything this guy says, and they let him go. They just, let him loose, and then they run off. And that should be the end of the story. And it should have been like, what is this? This is crazy. Of course, it never happened. Nobody really knows what happened. But years pass. The haunted house finally goes, belly up because, the city of St. Pete shut us down. And I start doing these books, and I start looking back into these stories, and I, of course, want to reach back out to this old lady, but she had long since passed. And I'm like, well, I'll never verify this story. I guess we'll never be able to write about it. But I start reaching out, and this time it's a bit more modern era, and I reach out on social media, and I reach out to people in a group. You grew up in Lake Wales when, and I posted in there and said, hey, does anybody remember this weird thing about, arresting a small person in the 40s? And I got a civilian employee of the police department remembered it and remembered the incident vividly, and him coming in the orange crate. And so now, like I said, Lake Wales loves creepy stuff, and they embrace their weird. So they are desperately trying to find the arrest records and the day's reporting and all the logs of that. And they've got people digging to try to find this. And they found one police report mentioning the disturbance and the orange thefts, and that they brought in.
So there's a police report on this?
There is a police report that there is a suspect brought in for questioning of unusually diminutive height. This is how they put it in the report.
Because I'm the homuncologist around here, and I'm known for the homunculus, the alchemical homunculus. And our hypothesis was that Mr. Edward Bach was some sort of wizard, perhaps, and this was his little homunculus or civilization of homunculi, I don't know, running around. And maybe that's what it was. Some sort of, every wizard has a tower. You have the Bach Tower or castles, right? And you have the Edward in Coral Castle. So very interesting. And so there is an actual police report of this. Do you have a copy of that?
They do have a document at Lake Wales Police Department, and they are trying to back it up with further corroboration. That's the thing. They've got one document that doesn't exactly say it. So it's one of those, they're trying to find more. Of course, if you were a detective in the 1940s, you didn't want to write this down. Come on, this is crazy. But the family said that one of their farmhands told them that it was red hats, that they had offended the gnomes, the fae, and that they needed to make an offering. And to do that, they needed to get a blessed rock from Ireland that would protect them. And this family apparently did send for that rock, according to the little old lady. And they got that in the late 1940s, got the rock sent to them, blessed by an Irish priest. And it was in their orange grove. And that orange grove is still there. And there are no more reports of gnomes. So maybe it worked. But what's funny is the orange grove is now owned by a corporation. And I'm not allowed to say the name of the corporation, but it rhymes with Schmapicana, so it could be any of them. But they gave us permission to go out and drive on that property to look for that rock, and we were following the little old lady's instructions, and it's very cool. Yeah, but they were from 1990 something, 97, 98 probably, in that area. And we're trying to follow those instructions, and it's dirt roads. It's an old orchard. The fact that it's still cool dirt roads, driving through an orange orchard with Bach Tower on the side, it must have been just like driving through Florida in the 30s. You get that same feel from it. But the area that we took the turns for, we were like, oh gosh, this is it. And there are all these weird boxes. And I'm like, wait a minute, what are all these boxes? And we were about to stop. I'm like, I wonder if they're still celebrating the rock or something like that. And we were about to get out, but that's where they keep their bees.
Interesting.
So we will not be getting out there. So we decided not to get out, but we were still pretty cool that we had little verifications for that story. So that's led us to actually publish that one, which was nice. But I like to just publish one and dones. I like to have, they got to have at least 2 points of verification. Otherwise I won't run with it.
Because that's one thing when you're taking these stories, and I have friends that have podcasts that are about weird stories, about people calling in and telling their encounters. And I know you've had an encounter with a skunk ape or a Bigfoot type-esque creature. And my whole thing with that is I've never experienced anything like that as far as paranormal goes. But how can you even determine if somebody's full of shit or not? Because I mean, you're gonna have a whole bunch of people who want to get exposure, who are gonna approach you like, oh, this dude's writing a book, I want my clout. How is there anything like studying their cues of how they move or how they talk? Because you're actually going and interviewing people, which is awesome. That you're getting these firsthand accounts instead of like me. When I'm doing research, I'm going off secondhand stuff. A lot of these places, they translate, when I'm doing my esoteric or occult research, it's a lot of Latin and all these different things that they translate. I'm not a translator, so I have to depend on other researchers who have translated these works. But is there anything that you take into account when you're going in and interviewing somebody for something of this nature, like the paranormal?
Well, like when I go into it, I really do try to first off, I'm a storyteller, so I want to hear the story from them, so that when I relay the story, I've got the story, how they tell it. And as a storyteller, you look for the tells, right? The things are, they're thinking about it. They're looking up, they're doing the weird pauses because they know that's the kind of stuff where you go, okay, there's something going on. But the ones who will stare at you and be like, look, I know this sounds crazy, but this is how it happened. And then you go, okay, this is something worth interesting. This is definitely, they saw something they can't explain. And I'm not a quick one to jump to paranormal or supernatural. I am very much people saw something they don't understand, and maybe someday we can understand it. So I like to get that. I like to call it preternatural stuff we don't understand yet. But yeah, there are the tells, and then you can tell the ones that really had something shake them visibly. They get, the goosebumps on the arms while they're talking to you. They shiver. They're afraid to tell you. And, those are the ones that you sit there and go, okay, something happened here, and that's the ones you really like. Those are the ones that draw me in. But again, then I look for a second source. One person saw it. Hey, great. That's an encounter. You saw something you don't understand. But if there was a second person with them, or third or fourth, or If it happened again, like a week later, a day later, somebody else saw it, same thing, independent of each other, that's when it is gold. That's when you're talking, okay, now we've got independent verification. And as long as I've been doing this, which now I'm the freaky Florida guy, the creepy Florida guy, I get a lot of emails from people all over saying, hey, I saw this weird thing. And they go into a file on my emails, that I'm like, I'll look at it. I'll read them. I do read every one. But then every once in a while, I'll get 2 or 3 from 3 different people who don't know each other describing the exact same event from a different angle. And that's the stuff where I go, great, I got to reach out to Stacy Brown team or a Outcast Paranormal or, whatever team is in the area that I know fits that, what UFO team, Bigfoot team, UFO, skunk ape team, whatever. I reach out to them and then say, hey, and if you don't mind, I'm going to hang along, because I'd like to get, some of that too. But, as a 50-year-old epileptic, I can't go on all the skunk ape hunts and all that. But
yeah. And I have a respect for that type of stuff as far as the paranormal goes. And I don't know if it's my Christian background or not, but whenever I was raised that, we have this filter, and there's something about Florida energetically that is really, not only does it attract people, and I look at Florida as this sort of, and maybe there is a Ben Stone or something, waking up an analog here. There is something drawing people in, because if you really think about it, Florida is like this alchemical vessel where people come here to transcend to the next dimension. They come here to die. Okay, they come here to retire, to wind down, and there's something just pulling them through. And I have a buddy of mine, Gabe, a Slick Dissident, where he talks about tarot Tories, and coincidentally, Florida is on the death card. So it's all about death. We have the oldest Florida in the oldest city in the United States, which is St. Augustine. And there's something here. There's also one of the tips of the Bermuda Triangle here as well. And all the Henrys, we've covered the Henrys extensively, and we're going to continue to be covering the Henrys extensively because that's what we talk about here on this channel. And there's something about, these robber barons that were coming down, and I believe that they knew something about the land, something that they were able to tap into. And let's not forget that Disney does not buy unvaluable land. They don't buy invaluable. They don't buy land that's not valuable. They are strategically placing their land in places where I believe energetically it's something about the land where, look at it. It's the most magical place on earth. Well, that's very weird wording to be. And I went this past weekend. I went with my family, and I was just looking around, man, and I saw some occult stuff, and I'm just like, it was like a Stargate looking thing I posted on my Instagram where they did a whole show at the end. They were just flashing a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, dude, they're stealing people's souls. And here I am participating in this ritual.
There's a lot of buildings out there that the public does not see that are designed so esoterically. Famously, where they have their credit union headquarters, it's right off of I-4, and it's just kind of on the edge of Disney property. And it was designed by a Chinese architect who designed a lot of Epcot. So you see all those weird buildings at Epcot. This guy also designed the swan and the dolphin, which have the swans and the dolphins that look nothing like swans and dolphins. But this guy, he was very into ley lines and stuff like that. So he built these buildings, but that bank building has a sundial. It's like one of the world's largest sundials in the middle.
Which building is this? So I can pull it up.
It's I believe it's just called the cast member. It was the credit union headquarters back in the 90s. I'm not sure what they use it for now, but it is no longer public accessible. But it has this giant sundial with a stone garden in the middle of it that's just open sky, and it has amazing echoes in it. I remember, cast member days, that was always the place we went to just, crash, because yes, we all worked for the mouse at some point down in Florida. And it's this beautiful building, and it definitely has some odd vibes when you get there. And and it's right along the ley line. Casadega's less than 20 minutes away. A whole town founded by psychics that has more psychics and witches per capita than even Salem, and nobody knows about it. Nobody goes there, and it's incredible.
Is it this?
That's it. Team Disney building. The sundial.
Interesting. Look at this, and it reminds me of the Coral Castle, the intricate sundial that he has there as well. And I want to run some ideas about Coral Castle maybe a little bit later. And for those that don't know, we're going to be probably doing about an hour and a half. And then the last 30 minutes, we're going to give the chat a chance to ask some questions maybe. So start thinking of some questions to come up with that we can ask Mark here to see if he does know it all about Florida. So, but this is very, very interesting.
Yeah, that building itself, like I said, is no longer accessible except only to cast members. I think there was one just a little further down the outside of it. That's it there on the bottom middle. Yeah. Look at that. So, again, weird architecture, weird design, not what you'd expect for just some cast member building, right? This
got the cube here, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
with the Mickey Mouse.
The hidden Mickeys, all about the hidden Mickeys, the three circles, got to have the Trinity. So it's, and that's, the way it's there. And that's just one of them. Of course, that was right after Epcot and right before the Swan and Dolphin when this was built. So, so that guy, Disney hired the right people to build this stuff. And, and that's just part of it. I mean, the whole land of Kissimmee, we're only recently figuring out what that word means, because the native tribe that it came from was, of course, wiped out. And, but what we're hearing now is, Al Goingback's like one of my favorite people in the world. He's a Bram Stoker winning author, Lifetime Achievement Bram Stoker winner. He's also a Seminole medicine man. He was the groundskeeper of Greenwood Cemetery in Orlando for like 10 years. This guy is just incredible. And he's my go-to whenever I get a folklore story from, that has any native mythology or native spiritualism in it. I call him and say, hey, is this real or is this bogus? Is this just some internet crap? And he'll look at it and give me some verifications of it and stuff like that. And one of the things that we've learned recently is, town of Orlando, everybody debates about where that name came from. Was the first mayor of Orlando was a fan of Shakespeare, or
interesting.
Supposedly there was a guy who died there, named Orlando, and that's where the cemetery was founded. So they'd go, here lies Orlando. So that's became the town Orlando. We don't really know. It's all folklore. There's been no historical. We can't find that grave. We don't know anything of, if that mayor was just a fan of Shakespeare. But Kissimmee,
out of everybody, too, Shakespeare, right?
Right.
one of the shadiest characters in history.
Yeah, of all the Shakespeare characters, Orlando, really? But to name a city after that, sure, why not? Florida, we can't have nice things. Everything changes its name when it gets here. Bigfoot becomes Skunk Ape. It's all that stuff. But anyway, Kissimmee, that we think we figured it out, and it's one of those. The tale is so dark. There was during the Native Relocation Act, the Indian Relocation Act, it was, push them out of Florida, and if you can hold the land for 3 years, you can keep it. And so all the settlers start booming in and bringing in the gunmen to chase everybody away. And so what they would do is they would massacre the men and do terrible things to the women and children and chase them away. Well, there is no word Kissimmee in any of the native languages of that time that anybody can find. And, but according to early settlers, they told them that's the name of this river is Kissimmee. Well, we found a native folklore tradition that says that what happened is when the white men came and started ravaging these villages, they would ravage the women and kill the men. So the Indians of that era had no word for, the R word for forcing themselves on another person. Right. I don't know what language level we can go on the show, so I'll stick with that. So I'm used to talking for high schools. So
I'm with you.
So anyway, they didn't have a word for that. So that atrocity. So when they came to this one village on this river, one of the native ladies came out to offer herself up as a sacrifice to spare the others. And she was trying to speak to them in their language, which was English. And so she was telling them, kiss me. And they took that to be the name of the river and the name of the village, and then did terrible things and chased them off, or murdered them. But so the happiest place on earth is probably based on a massacre.
Yeah, and the whole, again, back to the Henry. Somebody said here, so many can't pronounce. Is it Kissimmee or Kissimmee? Or like, how are you supposed to say it? I don't.
Depends on, it's just like Appalachia or Appalachia. Depends on which part of the mountains you're in. Kissimmee, if you're in Kissimmee, it's Kissimmee. And then if you're from, an older Florida, it's Kissimmee. And it could go either, it can go any way. It's honestly, there really isn't a right way to pronounce it because we don't know. It's a word that doesn't exist.
Yeah, yeah. And the back to the Henrys, because you're talking about atrocities and dark history, the dark foundations of, and this goes, I mean, this is all over the United States if we really think about it. And they did wipe out a lot of the indigenous people. It was a genocide.
Forcing them to move here.
Yes.
We chased them down here because Florida was just swamp and bugs and terribleness.
It was the last frontier. And one of the things that really blew my mind was when they were building their railroads, because the state was giving them credits of thousands and thousands of acres for building every 1 mile that they got done. They would come across these burial grounds of the indigenous, and they would take the bones and give them away as souvenirs to the workers of the time. So imagine how dark that is. And I mean, we have all the Henrys: Henry Flagler, Henry Plant, Henry Ford was down here. Everybody was down here, was popping back in the early 1900s with these guys. And yeah, just think about that, where they were desecrating the grave sites of these people and literally giving away their bones. Because back then, the lure of, and it goes back to Skull and Bones, of if you have this piece of this indigenous person, it's almost like a sort of talisman. It's a magically charged thing. So it would only make sense that they would give it away. And for those that are in the know, they know. And for those that don't, they're just like, hey, I have this skull of this indigenous person, right? That's way more connected to the land than I'll ever be, because I'm just here to take and that's it, right?
Oh man. Yeah. And there's so many, crazy things like that, and we, even to this day, there's a cemetery that's right along Interstate 75, right in the middle of Florida. And it's this old, it's right near Florida National Cemetery, which is this huge, it's Florida's Arlington, and right near Webster, Florida. And that place is amazing to visit. And it's bigger than Arlington. It's got more graves in it now because, like you said, Florida is where everybody comes to die. So the military, they get buried in, Florida National Cemetery. And it's mile after mile. And the reason they put it there was it was right next to the Dade battlefield, which was a Civil War battlefield, but also next to that was native burial ground. And so that's why they said, all right, the graves of Florida National Cemetery can only go so far because it's native burial ground behind it. And, so we will not go any further than that. Well, on the other side of the interstate, miles away, is this little cemetery called Cow Prairie Cemetery. It's been around for who knows how long. The earliest graves we know that are there are from the early 1800s. And there's some Civil War graves there. And they wanted to move it. They want to close it down because they want to build a gas station there for the Villages, which is a big, property complex here for retirement communities. And they literally wanted to build a gas station on that cemetery. So a few historical societies are doing ground penetrating radar on it to figure out, who all's buried there, because it's probably older than we think, because all we know of are the headstones. And they honestly think it might be bigger than it is. Well, sure enough, as they start doing the ground penetrating radar, they find out, yeah, it's a lot bigger than we thought. It's a lot older than we thought, because then they start seeing not just the casket burials, but they see the sitting burials. So it was native land too, that another burial went on, a settler plot went on top of what was native burial grounds.
Whoa.
So now it's an archaeological site, but as they do more research on it, guess what? I-75 right there apparently bulldozed right over and just didn't tell anybody that they were uncovering these these bodies back in the day when they built the interstate.
That cannot be good for the energy in that area. And Mark, what is one of the craziest stories as far as local legends or folklore that you like, or that has blown your mind the most as far when it comes to Florida? Is it if it's skunk ape or cryptid or just some crazy legend? Is there one that really just makes your nipples hard? Like when you listen to, you're like, this is crazy. I got to write about that.
Okay, well, the one that drove us, the wildest was probably the Devil's Tree down in Port St. Lucie.
That one's dark.
That one's dark, and the more you dig into it, the darker it gets. And the fact that the legend predates the darkness is scary. When you find out people talked about it before, the serial killer comes into picture. It's like, well, wait, what? That can't be right. No, it is. There's notes from the 60s and the 50s and probably even the 40s. If you look at this one note, where somebody was kind of talking about this crazy tree in Port St. Lucie. And it's like, wait a minute. So, because the story goes that if you go to that tree and you collected the black sap that drips from it, it would, and use it to make your ritualistic candles, it would make your dark magics infinitely more powerful.
Wow.
And yeah, right. That's the initial story. And then, there he is. There's good old Gerard.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Please tell me more about this.
Okay.
So never heard about this.
Never heard of it. All right. So
asking for a friend, of course, right, Narco?
Yeah.
You don't need to know about this, right? You're not worried about that. But anyway, so this tree, if it drips black sap and you collect it, like I said, that, then what happens is they tried to kill the tree, right? They decide we're going to kill it. That's the hole where the black sap drips there. And they decide, let's kill the tree. So we'll chop it down. Well, the two guys they hire to cut down the tree, the second the chainsaws hit the tree, their chainsaws stop and break. So they go buy more chainsaws. And then they're hit in a head-on collision and both men die instantly.
Oh, shit.
So the story grows. And then it becomes, the reason they died was they had bits of the tree. So if you take bits of the tree and put it in a car of somebody you don't like say your cheating husband or cheating girlfriend, you can get away with murder, right? Because they're going to get in a car accident. And the reason we know that didn't work is because the lady who told us that version of the story put it in her car, and she was going to go put it in her chainsaw, put it in her husband's car, and she got in a car accident and almost died. So on the way there, so somehow you got to transport it without transporting it. It's tricky. But then the city decides, all right, we're gonna poison it. That didn't work because obviously you still see it's there. Then we're gonna fill that hole that drips the black sap with cement, and then maybe that'll kill it because it'll choke to death. But now it's growing around that, as you see, and now it's got an impervious chainsaw preventable cement trunk, so it's not going anywhere. And that's all before 1970s, when Gerard John Schaefer, a sheriff's deputy from Miami, who is a serial killer who likes to do twofers, would take them to the tree, tie them to it in elaborate rope things, and then make them decide who dies first, and does terrible things to them, does terrible things to their bodies. And there was an old abandoned house near there that he used as his base of operations. Thankfully, he lost his job and he had to move north, move back in with his mom. And that's where he tried it again, but he wasn't with the tree. He wasn't with the house. So he got caught and went to jail for who knows how many people he killed. He was only tried for 2 because they were able to find the 2 people that he got caught with, explain the situation. And it just so happened to be right at that time back at the Devil's Tree, somebody found some body parts and they were able to piece 2 and 2 together and said, oh, this is what he was doing. And then they used matching and figured out, the teeth that he has in his shoebox hiding in his mother's house match the names of the victim, match the victims from down there. So again, it blows up. It brings that legend even further and cements it. Well, the reason he got away with it for so long was because he had the tree. The tree was making him do it.
Interesting, because I was going to go there. I was actually going to visit that tree, and I did a whole episode on the Devil's Tree until I learned what had actually happened there, and I was like, do I really want to go there? Do I really want to expose myself to this negative energy? Because That's very freaky. Yeah, for those that don't know, he was a cop and he was pulling people over and taking advantage of his position. And
Yep.
I never heard it from that point that the tree was the one that was it talking to him? Do you know if that's part of it too?
He never said that, but that's what the legends say now. It's that he was influenced by the tree and all that. I think he was just a sick guy who just knew of an old abandoned place, and the fact that it happens to be the Devil's Tree is interesting. And then finally the city buys the land, bulldozes the house, and turns it into a park, and then the trails don't go anywhere near the Devil's Tree. You have to know how to get there. So
can I ask what type of tree it was?
It's an oak. It's a live oak.
So it's just a regular live oak.
Regular live oak, nothing special.
Do they know of any other live oaks that use black
sap? No. And honestly, every time I've been there, I haven't seen black sap. And but every time I've been there, I have seen people putting candle wax on the roots where they've done rituals there.
Wow.
And almost every time I've been there. And I
For
always
those that want to go find it, there are the coordinates.
Yeah, and it's in Ocheesee State Park in Port St. Lucie, which is a beautiful park. Highly recommend you visit it.
Yeah, we gotta go.
Just when you go to that area, make sure pay your respects to the victims. We know of 2, but there are probably more. Hey, look, Freaky Florida. I know that book.
Hey, this is Mark's book. For those we read it
Eerie
on the
was our
Gnome
first
episode.
one,
Yeah.
And then Freaky was the one with the Devil's Tree in it. So
Yeah, we should have started out with that. Sorry, guys. I was
that's all good.
on a long call. Had to catch up on some dinner. But
yeah, George John Schaefer, he was killed in prison by his roommate, stabbed 49 times and both his eyes cut out. So
The guy that did it?
Oh my God.
The guy that did the Devil's Tree?
He was a writer. He wrote books. He said all those times he wrote that he basically wrote confessions to 86 murders. And when they asked him about it, he said, "Oh, I'm writing a book. And those are just how I could have done it." And so that's what he published, in prison, a book called Killer Fiction. And you can check it from your local library. Don't spend any money on it.
Whoa. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that's like the Cannibal Cop where he was writing fictional stories. Yeah. And it's like, when does we know that occultist, even if he was an occultist doing like black magic stuff, we know that occultists occult these stories as fictional writings, right? We have Crowley who had family in Titusville, right? I don't know if you know anything about that.
Yep. The Crowley house is near in Mayaca State Park, and it was the only thing that did not get destroyed in the recent flooding down there.
Of course.
Wow.
So I'll tell you something. I've spent the night in that house. It's creepy. So
is this where Stacy did his?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, is that why they called it the Crowley house? I was wondering because
that's where his family was. I don't think there's any proof that he was ever there, but that's where his family was.
Oh man, yeah, because I heard him say that, and they're doing the whole ritual with trying to summon the skunk ape, and he did the hymn to Pan, and then the other guy upstairs taking psychedelics, staring into a mirror.
Yep.
I don't know what could really come of that, but the idea that Florida, I've heard people say that Florida is good for manifestation because of the water around it, and I know we have a high water table, and one of the things about water is it retains memory. So the idea that they're able to tap into some sort of, again, energy by being able to tap into the all the memories of everything. And I mean, I don't know. Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, I think it's limestone bedrock. It's got for most of the state. We do have caverns, but they're all up in the Panhandle because you go further down, they're not. But we get the sinkholes, and then we get sinkholes on top of sinkholes. My favorite there is another devil's term, the Devil's Mill Hopper up in Gainesville is a sinkhole on top of another sinkhole, and that was
tell us about that.
The entrance to the underworld, because when the early settlers come in, they see these strange bones down at the bottom, and in that swampy area down at the bottom, you actually go through 3 ecosystems there, because up top is Florida scrubland. As you go down, it becomes more subtropical. And then when you get down to the bottom, it is actually tropical rainforest down at that bottom.
Jesus.
But down there at the bottom, they had all these weird bones, right? And so they thought, these must be devils. This is the entrance to the underworld. This is the river Styx, because everything's flat and it's only a deep crevice in Florida. And what those bones were dinosaur bones. And
Dinosaurs are fake, Mark. Come on,
exactly.
dude.
So, well, it may have been dragons, may have been demon skulls. We don't know. But most of them were taken before anybody could get there and do some real surveying. But but they have a native legend there that a giant alligator demon caused it. It was
Have you ever seen the Temukua giant alligator?
That's part of the lore, no? That place.
Engravings?
Part of that lore. There's Chief Tomoki had had that, and the Timucuan giant alligators. That's the lore. He was a demon named Ati.
Have you seen the etching of the Temukua hunting the giant alligator?
Yes, and that's near Devil's Millhopper. So that was where it was found. So that's why that's the legend is attributed to that. Where
that's
the
insane.
The demon stole the princess,
Mm-hmm.
and then all the warriors come to fight, and he summons the giant alligator to stop him, and then they can't. So they cut down a tree, and the chieftain spears the creature with it, but not after losing dozens of men, and that's supposedly the mouth is Devil's Millhopper.
So I want to ask you, because you said the river Styx.
Yeah.
Did you know about New Smyrna colony?
Yeah. I think New Smyrna actually predates St. Augustine, and I get in a lot of trouble from St. Augustine people.
Do you know why? Because when Turnbull got there, he said he found a Greek colony. Not that he started a Greek colony.
No, that it was already there. And then that base, when the Turnbull Mansion finally was destroyed, they go down to the foundation. Wait, there's an older foundation, and there might be an even older foundation further down, but nobody wants to touch it. Nobody wants to dig down. Why?
What can I ask you? Because that's a perfect segue. What do you think the New Smyrna, old fort, Turnbull hotel, whatever they call it?
Yeah.
What do you think it really is? Origin, or what do you have to piece it together?
I think honestly, when you look at that foundation, from the X-rays that they've done and everything that they have done, they were allowed to do. Once they started doing ground printing greater radar, suddenly, that might damage the foundation, and we can't do it anymore. What? When? How is that going to damage foundation? But you guys, Coquina, there's a Coquina foundation there. But that's built onto something. Is it a limestone, just a natural limestone bedrock that happens to be cut in a very specific pattern? No, I think there was a settlement there that originally founded and was living there. St. Augustine's founded just a little ways north, about maybe 50 years later. And we have some documents of people coming this way, but didn't make it. But, we do know Hernando de Soto and all those other guys were here at the time, exploring both sides of Florida, and or up to Appalachian, which was up in the Panhandle, and that's they didn't know how big this place was. So I do think Smyrna, it may not have been Smyrna, but it was definitely a colony of some sort long before St. Augustine. And I think if we go down to like the Miami Mystery Circle down in Miami, where where we know that's now, we realize, we thought that was, initially they thought it was like an air conditioner drain from the 60s, and then they start digging and go, wait, this is older, and what are these weird holes that are randomly dug? And there's no fire pit, so it can't have been a native settlement. What if they built on stilts?
So do you know about the astrological alignments?
Not of the Mystery Circle. I haven't heard that.
No. Juan, pull that up. Can you zoom in on that one? Okay, so you ready to have your mind blown?
Yeah, give me a second.
Oh yeah.
We've talked about the Miami Circle extensively on my channel and with Juan. I'm an astrologer. Not only what they thought these was you're right. They thought it was a drainage pit for an old like 1890s hotel,
right? Something
like that, because that septic tank is dated to late 1800s. Well, all those little holes in the middle, they really had no idea for. They just kind of guessed the ring was kind of crudely etched out by an old primitive, not primitive, but late 1800s Victorian era, plow or whatever. Well, then they find out all of those holes, they tried to say were ancient post molds,
Right.
that this was an ancient teepee. That's what they try and say that this was.
Yeah.
Well, that it may have been used for that at some point, but its origin is far more spectacular than that. All of these holes are aligned to the 12 constellations in the sky.
That's pretty epic. Yeah, I hadn't seen that. I went with the post hole theory because even that was amazing, because you realize if they dug a new hole every time they put in a new post, it would have been, all right, so this post rotted over so many thousand years or so many 100 years, and somebody did the math and they realized, all right, this would have been here 5,000-6,000 years if that's the case. So it would have been the oldest settlement
and
in North America. It would predate the Mayans.
This is the oldest bedrock manipulation in the Americas.
Yeah, it's crazy.
This is the oldest known bedrock, whatever they'd call it, architecture, bedrock something.
Either way, it makes the Calusa Indians this amazing tribe that we thought were just hunter gatherers. Look how incredible this is. And
you know what else is they built so close to the modern day water line.
Yeah.
That it either would have had to have been 6,000 years earlier, indicating they were definitely some of the oldest people on the peninsula, or they were so high sophistication, they were so advanced that they could foretell flooding and storm events by days and days and days and get the heck out of there. I think it's more likely that they were there when the sea level was farther out. But either way, it shows a high degree of sophistication.
And some of the stuff they had down there, like the basalt axe heads that came from the tribes up near Ohio and Lake Erie. Yeah. It's like, okay, so there was a trading network of some sort.
Yeah.
Even that's crazy.
Florida has some of the oldest Clovis bifacial tool technology. And they don't know how, because that doesn't link up with the timeline we're given in school of people coming from Alaska.
Yeah,
it indicates a clear transatlantic network, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of those. Now you're asking me, like the story that gives me tingles besides the Devil's Tree. The other one, we'll go a cryptid on this one, but I think this is a cryptid that we can almost say definitely existed.
Sure.
And that is the Punta Gorda turtle, which is a rare one.
I wasn't expecting that.
Haven't heard of this.
Haven't heard of this one?
No.
Okay, so 1937 Florida Alabama hurricane comes through, and it was before we named them, so that's all we called it. Was the Florida Alabama hurricane, and it goes right up the coast, pulls an Ian, but doesn't turn into Punta Gorda. It goes straight up, strafes the Florida coast, and heads over to Alabama, like a lot of them do. But this did that thing we saw in Ian and in before that Irma and all that, where it pulls the water out of the bays and drains them because all the water's been sucked into that hurricane. And so Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte, is this area. The water gets sucked out of it, and this is 1930s. Everybody's starving. Everybody's dying because of the depression. So they rush out there because they see all this seafood just literally laying there, and grab the crabs, grab the oysters, grab whatever you can. And so the families are all out there. And then this one family, according to folklore, sees a treasure chest, like way out on the water line. And they think, ooh, pirate treasure or, Spanish treasure, who knows? But they're going to run out. It could save their family. So they run out there, get really deep out there. And the water's still a little bit in that area, but they can't break open the chest. They try everything. Finally, they get into the chest, and it's cannonballs. So nothing really spectacular for them at the time. And, still a cool historical find, but not what you're thinking about. And then the water's coming back, and it comes back fast. So they have nowhere to go. They start scrambling to get back to shore. They see some high ground, looks like a hill, and they go run over to that hill and they get on it. And then the water comes, and there's like, oh, this is going to be underwater soon. We should go further. But then it picks up and starts floating, and they're like, oh no, we're on an upside down boat. We're going to get washed out to sea still. Well, hopefully the water's going back to shore. Maybe we'll be survived. But then it turns against the current. And they're like, what's going on? It's family of 4. And they look down, and the little girl says she sees a head and flippers, and they're on a giant turtle. And it takes them to shore, saves the family. It's this amazing story. And everybody says you're crazy. A giant turtle can't save a family of 4 and all this. Well, 1962. Yes, there's Carrie's illustration of it. My wonderful wife, who's the real talent of the operation. She's the illustrator.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So the story was it was a box turtle, right?
Wow.
Crazy little box turtle that does this. But to be it's wild and weird. But then in the 1960s, the U.S. Navy has turned Port Charlotte Harbor into a defensive position because the Russians are right there in Cuba. We're ready for them. They're coming. And they see a dark shape. A diver's out there cleaning the harbor. He sees a dark shape and reports it to naval headquarters. Says, we got a sub coming. We got, it's enemy subs, got to be, because we don't have anything in the waters. So they scramble. And what they describe is they see a 30-foot loggerhead turtle.
Jesus.
Would be the biggest ever recorded if they're accurate. Because most of them grow to about 18 to 20 feet, as far as we know.
Was it 33 feet though?
They grow to 20 feet already.
They can grow up to 20 feet. The largest ever captured was 17 in diameter.
Jesus.
What's the name of this turtle? 17-foot what?
The Punta Gorda turtle. Punta, Punta, Gorda, Gorda. But the Navy has divers sketch it because it was so big, and they were like, this is crazy. So in the same harbor, 30 years later, definitely a family of 4 could ride on that, or at least hold on to it, for safety. So maybe the story was exaggerated, or something like that. And that area is huge for native lore of turtles because a lot of native lore is turtles. So yeah, there's a loggerhead.
This is
snapper.
I recently went to the Broward Zoo or Brevard, whichever one it is. The one up here by me. I'm in Central Florida. I'm in St. Cloud actually. So and I saw I pulled it up on a stream that we did. It was a snapping alligator turtle, and it was the biggest alligator turtle I've ever seen in my life. And I can only imagine being, early 1900s, the last frontier, Florida, and they're walking through the swamp and running into dinosaurs. Because that's a dinosaur. I mean, if you look at this thing, it's a freaking dinosaur. Look at that.
Oh yeah, they're
you know what I mean? Like running into something like this.
Can I ask, is a loggerhead an alligator snapping turtle?
No, a loggerhead turtle. They're also called leatherback turtles.
Okay, so a leatherback is a loggerhead. So a leatherback sea turtle.
Yeah, leatherback's a sea turtle. So
leatherback sea turtle. Okay,
it's one of these. So this is a leatherback, right, where it looks smooth.
See how big those get?
These get ginormous.
Yeah, they can get huge. Look, people
17 feet.
I've seen one on the beach that was as big as a smart car.
Yeah.
They are huge.
They're even discovering a new species of turtle out there. They call it, it was big headlines just last year, as big as a shark. And, so, how big can they grow? We don't know. Wow. So this one, I think we can put a check mark that this one may have really happened. A cryptid folklore story that, look at that. I mean, that's.
Yeah. This is wild. So, and that's why one time I was partaking in some mushrooms, the psychedelic kind, and I was watching a documentary, and I remember seeing a manta ray, because those things get giant too. Yeah. Oh, and I go, why are we going and looking into outer space, looking for other life forms when there are literally aliens? Look at this thing. This thing it's a monster, and it's on, how you said, it's provable. It's something that there's records of it. And even with the skunk ape, there's records of the Gigantopithecus where, I mean, that did exist at one point. Now, is it still around? That's up for debate. But yeah, this is fascinating.
And
you know, the manta rays they were pulling out in like the 1920s were as big as spaceships. It's
there's a picture of Teddy Roosevelt after he'd retired and he had come down to Tampa Bay to do some spear fishing, and he's got and he was big Teddy, you know, he's like three of me put together, and he's got a manta ray, you know, just spread out that's insane that he caught. And it's like, that's, you know, that's nuts. Teddy, our beloved cryptid hunting president. So, you know, he went after the snallygaster and he has had a Bigfoot encounter. Come on. You should be, everybody's like, well, I'll believe it when I hear a president talk about it. Well, Teddy talked about it a lot. And, you know, nobody, there's that picture.
And he's the one that implemented the preserves, right? The National Parks Act.
National Park Preserve, because there were all these weird things. He wanted to protect them. These unique beauties, he called them.
And we have Abraham Lincoln talking about the giants that stared. What's the quote, Narco? You know it, where he talks about the giants here in the States.
I mean, I don't know the exact quote, but yeah, he says pretty much the giants that once roamed these hills, and he's talking about America.
Well, Davy Crockett, before he went west, talked about a big hairy creature of the wilds came to him and told him, "Don't go." Well, and then he went to the Alamo, and that's his last writings, was talking about this great hairy beast that warned him.
Can I ask you, have you heard about him going to the North Pole? Have you heard that story?
I have heard that story.
And him setting the sun back straight, or I might be conflating that with another founding father.
I think I heard that one was a Paul Bunyan at one point, and I've heard that one attributed to a few. Davy Crockett, Daniel Boone, that one, I've heard that one make the rounds. So, that one, I did my new book's Eerie Appalachia. So it was, returning back to my roots. So nice. I got to hear a lot of those fun ones on the way. So that's a good story.
Timucua, when the Spanish and French arrived, were about 7'9".
That's what the Spanish said. Yeah.
On the high end, at the minimum, if that's on the high end, if you assume that their tallest guy was over 6 foot, if their tallest guy was only 5'6", which the probability is not high. I know they were shorter back then, but their tallest man to only be 5'6", and they specifically said that he was 1.5 feet taller than the tallest man on their expedition. Yep. Right there, Chief Athor, right there.
Yeah,
stood 1.5 feet taller than the Huguenot Laudonnière, I think his name was.
Mm.
And they not only were that tall and pretty much giant, right? Giants. At the minimum, they were 7 feet tall, 6'6" at the minimum. The Seminoles today, in the 1960s, the average height of a Seminole was 6'4".
Yep. They're still, like my friend Al, he's pretty tall. So up in the Appalachians, the mounds, there are all these stories of when they were excavating the mounds in the 1920s and 1930s, they were pulling out skeletons of giants and skeletons of this, and then the Smithsonian would come and take them. But now you ask the Smithsonian about any of that, and they're like, "Oh no, that was just yellow journalism. We don't have anything like that." I don't know what you're talking about.
I have so many articles from Florida.
Do you have the Ocheesee Pond Wild Man? That's one of my favorite. You know that one? Oh,
is that Florida?
That's Florida. It's Panhandle.
This is why we have you on, Mark, because you know all the goodness, bro.
Okay, so this is all right. You want to talk about conspiracy theory, but documented? Okay, the town of Ocheesee, which you got to love those native words. We're not exactly sure how it was pronounced, but that's what it's still called today. Ocheesee. It's Ocheesee. It's more fun to say Ocheesee because Florida, we love to call things the fun name. The Ocheesee Pond Wild Man, that somebody mentioned it in the comments there. The Ocheesee Pond Wild Man. So what it is this town's early 1800 settlement. They are, right outside of Gainesville. It's not too far from them, which is the capital of the new fledgling United States. This is right after the treaty that has made us finally part of the United States. And this town has a problem. Stuff's missing. Stuff keeps, livestock keeps getting killed. They think they've got, some restless natives. So let's send out a posse. And what they come back with is a giant hairy creature of about 8 foot in height, according to the articles.
Oh my God.
And the early sketch for the newspaper article is these two guys with guns holding up, little muskets at this thing, and it's in a cage that's only up to its waist. And that's how big this thing is. And it's big and hairy, and it's basically a Bigfoot when you read the descriptions. It's a Sasquatch. This thing. You've
seen a picture of it?
There isn't a newspaper article illustration of it. I don't know. Hey, there's Connor Flynn there. We were talking about him earlier. In that the middle picture there with the two guys in front of that's Connor on the right. So, from Bigfoot Anonymous, that's his.
Yeah, I'll have to have him on because I want to talk about Curse City as well after this.
Oh, Curse City. We can talk about Curse City. Yeah, definitely. But anyway, the Ocheesee Pond, right? So they've caught him. What do we do with this giant creature? Send him to the governor. Governor will know what to do with it. So they strap him to the back of a stagecoach. I'm picturing something like a U-Haul trailer with a cage behind it, but who knows? We do have newspaper articles of them sending him to the governor. We have documentation that the governor signed for it, but he didn't know what to do with it. So he sent it to the Florida Home for the Insane, which is not too far, in Tallahassee. So, we knew it made it there. We have records of it arriving as basically a John Doe. And we have records of them taking him to be shaved. And then we have records of his death less than 3 months later. That's all we've got. And he was buried in the paupers' graves. Okay, he was basically a John Doe. All right. So let's dig it up, right? Let's find out this 8 foot tall creature. Let's get the DNA and all that. Well, the problem is the pauper's grave has since been covered by the Florida State Hospital. Has been built over it. So there is no way to ever dig it up. And there is no records of them ever removing the burial stuff or anything like that. They just literally built on top of the grave of all the early, mental ill patients that they just didn't care about. So, but we have records and national newspaper articles of the time of the capture of this creature / wild man. Which was, before it was coined Bigfoot or Sasquatch. That's what we called it in the newspapers. So the Ocheesee Pond Wild Man is one of those documented stories. And now, of course, there are ghost sightings of this Bigfoot in that area. So the ghost of a Sasquatch, or skunk ape, as we call him here now. So
yeah, and I remember that story. I think that was in Stacy's documentary, wasn't it? Finding.
I think he did that because that's one of our big claims to fame is that was the earliest capture of a Bigfoot, So.
Yeah. And then he told me recently about Curse City, which I didn't know because I wanted to talk about like weird stuff in Ocala because I've been having people message me about weird things that occur in the Ocala forest. And he told me about Curse City, which if you want to explain that one blew my mind. I was like, what in the world?
Yeah, it was basically, it was founded by the early trains going through, there were all these little boom towns would pop up and disappear just as quick as they'd arrive. They were usually turpentine factories because they would basically just plug the trees and make turpentine out of it, and then they would ship it on the train down to wherever, Miami, Tampa, whatever. Curse City was one of those, and it's on Lake Kerr, and it was several families settled there. It was a big hotel there, and for a long time. After it became a ghost town, it was still open to the public. You could still come and visit it. Most famously, the hotel was bought by a cult at one point that decided they were going to, hey, let's found New Eden. It worked for the Koreans down at the Korean area. We're going to do it here in Curse City. They were just off by a few hundred miles, and we're going to build it here. But what happened was this guy who who put the people in the hotel. He took all their money. Their religious leader took all their money and then left in the middle of the night. So you got to love that. And so they tried to burn it down because they were also angry that they didn't get their money back. This was long after the town had pretty much fallen into disrepair. It is private property though. you have to get permissions from the owners to go visit this place now. It used to be open to the public a few days a week up until 2011. You could still go visit this town. And they, yeah, there it is. Private property. Do not go there.
Yeah.
The reason is the family that owns it, they're old. They don't want to keep up with it. And, it's overrun, and, you'll trip, you'll hurt yourself, and then they're liable, if they let you on the property. So, they'll let proper people go. So there are ways to reach out to get there, but you don't just expect to go wandering in there if you're spending the night in the Ocala National Forest. But even as late as the 1980s, 1990s, they were renting out the houses there. You could stay there, and many people there said they saw skunk apes or Bigfoots or ghosts. That was a common thing too back then. So Boy Scout camp was rented the whole place, and that is one of the famous Bigfoot encounters. Was they something set off their car alarms, and they ran outside. So this is how recent that was. Car alarms were a thing, and they went outside, and there was a big creature that had thrown something at their car, and they chased it into the woods. So
interesting. And you had your encounter. Was that here in Florida, or was that somewhere else?
Mine was up north. Mine was up in the woods of Kentucky. So right on the West Virginia, Kentucky border in that area. So that was where my encounter was.
Because the idea of having this Bigfoot, and I know that Narco, how do you feel about it? Because I know you've told me that you don't believe in it, bro. What do you think it is? Do you think it's just bullshit? Do you think it's just a projection of the imagination, or what?
It's not that. I definitely have reason to believe in it. I've seen UFOs, and people would roll their eyes at that. I do think, and I will say this confidently, I think it's kind of the lowest hanging fruit, and I think it's the go-to one that people choose for attention seeking and stuff like that. It might be tied with UFOs as far as that goes, but
I tend to lean that way myself.
I think you also see the most like bullshit on the mainstream in terms of Bigfoot research, where it's just so, like on Animal Planet or Discovery Channel, whatever it is, late night cable, and they're just making a whole lot out of nothing, and they'll do a year's worth of research and come out with not a single photograph, not a single piece of hair, not a single piece of, but they'll just be chasing smoke and mirrors. So there's a lot of that, and I think you shouldn't cast that on everyone that's into it. I think there's also a multitude of possibilities. Like if you've ever heard Lloyd Pye, I like Lloyd Pye, who kind of took an ancient alien angle, and I believe in Bigfoot more than I believe in aliens. But Lloyd Pye pointed out how if the panda bear went undiscovered for decades with people actively searching for it, and it's one of the slowest, dumbest, most dependent species in the world, where it's entirely dependent on one food source. And if you know where that food source grows and it's a small area, then you know where the pandas are. If the panda has gone unnoticed for decades and decades, and it did with all these old robber baron hunters chasing after it, they thought it was mythical. For those that don't know, the panda bear was originally believed to be pure myth, and they had only a couple hides that had ever been seen, and they were carted away for a large amount of money. But basically, blah blah blah, they found a panda bear, and then they found out they were real, and then people had to get acclimated very quickly to the idea that they're now real. So we really could be on the verge of that at any point, as far as something big, larger out in the woods that's good at eluding people, right?
I think it's just like, it's like ghosts. It's like, like UFOs and all this. I think these are things we don't understand, and someday we might. I like to. When I first started this years and years ago, the UFO people would not talk to the Bigfoot people. Bigfoot people would not talk to the ghost people. The ghost people wouldn't talk to anybody. It was only ghosts, and now, because I mean, the shows are shows. Look, I've done some Discovery Channel, I've done some Travel Channel, and they take 2 hours of interview and they'll put in the minute 30 seconds of me that they like in Ancient Aliens. They'll because they can twist it to what they want it to be. The Curse of Robert the Doll documentary, I filmed for 3 days and I'm in like maybe 20 minutes of it. So I'm still in it a lot more than I thought I'd be. But you got to remember, these shows are entertainment. They're television. It's Skinwalker Ranch is a crazy place, but the show is television. Curse of Oak Island, how many seasons and they still haven't found anything? Guess what? It's television. They may never find anything. There may not be anything to find. We don't know, but it's good television, so we watch it. And that's with the ghost hunters, the ghost shows. When you go to a place where one of the major shows has been, one of my favorites is Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum up in West Virginia. They'll give you their tour. And then they will go, now this is the room where the Ghost Adventurers found their ghost, but our ghost is over here. Yeah. So they're admitting that there was, it's made up, and it's, oh yes. Yeah, definitely a Floridian, no longer with us. Yeah. Him and Scott Marlowe, who did all the lake monster research. I worked with him quite a bit, and he passed away last year, sadly. We're losing them faster than we can keep them. And that's one of the things I do is I try to tell everybody, look, yes, some of these are folklore. Some of these are just stories, but we need to keep them alive. We need to tell these stories, because otherwise they're going to disappear. Especially these folklore up in the Appalachians, as I was discovering, is like, the Meemaws and Peepaws would tell these stories and then they're just gone. The Meemaws and Peepaws are dying off, so that's all this. We really want all this stuff to just keep it alive. And who knows, like, imagine if that Punta Gorda turtle story had just disappeared in the 30s. When the 60s turtle showed up, no one would have put two and two together. It still took a few years for people to start going, wait a minute, this kind of fits. It's
is that in your book, Eerie Florida?
Which one? The
turtle story.
The turtle's in Freaky. It's in the sequel. It's in Freaky Florida. Same one with the double
Florida.
Okay. Eerie was our first one. That one was all the major ones, because that was our first one doing right out of the haunted house days. I ran a haunted house for 20 years and collected all the stories. That's where it all started. Nice. But the first one was Eerie Florida. So that was everything from Robert the Doll to the Gulf Breeze UFOs. But we threw at Pinky, our sea monster. We threw in some others that were unique, that we knew were kind of lesser known, like Mini Lightning, the Voodoo Queen of St. Petersburg, and the Trestle Monster from Tampa, which may have influenced Slender Man, things like that. And because that hit the bestseller list, they let us go crazy with the second book, Freaky Florida. So we got to do deeper dives, off the beaten path stuff. So we got to do also some stuff we debunked, but was still cool historically. So they let us do that. And then our third book was Creepy Florida, and that was the ghost book, because we had so many ghost stories. There's our gnome, Bach Tower, right there.
Yeah, Bach Tower. And I forgot what I was going to ask you, but is there, because the subject of UFOs and USOs too, because you talk about it in the book, and I know Narco Longo has seen a UFO before, and I've recently learned that Florida is like number 3 in the United States as far as UFO sightings. Do you think there's a reason for that? Is there a portal here in Florida that we don't know about? Maybe out in the Everglades somewhere? Because I've spent a lot of time out in the Everglades, because I do fish a lot. And it's like a different world out there. It's a different energy. Just the air is charged, and it's really rejuvenating. Like when you're out there all day, it like wakes you up. It's something that you can't explain unless you're there, and I love it. But is there something about it that is it a portal that they're coming through in the swamps or something?
I mean, again, we don't know. It's one of those. We do have a lot of military bases, so I'm one of those that is of some of this is stuff that the military might be messing with. So the Pensacola area is where we have a lot of sightings, and that's Pensacola Naval Base and Eglin Air Force Base. And if we're doing some joint programs, that would be the place to test it. And then Miami has Coast Guard, Air Force, everything. It's so
US too.
Yeah, and in MacDill here in Tampa Bay, and that's where we've seen, I think the Black Triangles are seen the most in Tampa Bay area. And some people consider there might be a squadron.
Could you go into that a little more?
What, the Black Triangles?
Black Triangles in Tampa Bay?
Yeah, they're seen all over, but Tampa Bay seems to be a hot spot.
Wow.
They think there's if somebody's done the math, that they think there's like a dozen of them in this area. Now, I'll remember in the 1980s driving home one day from high school at the time, and I'm driving along and I see two F-16s with this strange craft between them, and I'm like, oh my God, they're finally announcing they've got aliens. This is going to be a big press because I'm seeing it broad daylight, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I get home and I'm turning on the news. I'm waiting for the alien news, and it was the announcement of the new stealth bomber, which when you see that in flight, it looked like a UFO to me back then before we'd seen them. So,
like a triangle, right?
Yep, exactly. Looked like a triangle.
Like a black kite.
Big black triangle. Yep. But now, though, I think there's an advanced version of that. And I think it's something I've talked to many witnesses. My one guy was out on his boat and he sees his depth finder starts going off. Where he was in 400 feet and now suddenly he's in 40 feet. What's going on? He hasn't moved. And he's like, oh God, there's a whale coming up under his boat or something. He's going to capsize. And so he rushes to the deck and he sees this black shape under the water. And then it breaks the water, barely making any sound as it breaks the water. You can hardly hear the waves, and then it hovers above him just about 100 feet in the air. And it's giant and it's black ship and it's barely making a hum. Just this light hum, and I'm like, did you take pictures of it? Of course I did, but it's black on black, and it's literally just a black picture. You can't see anything on it, and then it just takes off, fast as it can.
Wow.
And he said hardly made any noise, hardly disturbed the water. He's like, I'm like, did you think it was aliens? Do you think I don't know what it was.
The Scientologist owned it because if it was over by Tampa, then that's probably a sign.
You gotta love Clearwater, but they own.
Can I ask you
downtown Clearwater? So
can I ask you about the Opalaka sightings? Do you know about that one?
I know a little bit. That's not one of the ones I've done a lot of deep dive into.
It was like an entire school.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't know much about it either.
Recently went into was the Crestview sighting, which is down in Miami, and that one was pretty crazy because it was a whole school saw it, and
I think you said Miami.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably the same exact one.
Yeah. Okay.
Opalaka is like Miami Gardens, Miami Springs.
Okay. Yeah, because that would be it would have been Crestview then. And Crestview is no longer there now because there is a Crestview, Florida up in the Panhandle, but that was called, the neighborhood was called Crestview, and it was Crestview Elementary. And that might've been in Opalaka area now that I think about it.
Yeah. This sounds like the same one.
And it was
school, the students, teachers, they interviewed them years later too. And
they interviewed them immediately and then years later. Yeah. And now what was cool about that's what started me on my book at Eerie, Appalachia, because what happened was, all these people started emailing me after the Navy trial, the Navy, stuff started leaking and was on the news. And then suddenly the Senate's having a trial about, UFOs, which I never thought was going to happen in my lifetime. After Blue Book got shut down, I thought that was it. But I started getting emails from these people who are in their 70s and 80s now going, hey, they told me it was helicopters, but I saw this, which we would call the Tic Tacs now. And they said that was around a saucer with a turret was the mothership. And then these little things were flying around it and it almost lands right across from the school. And, and the witnesses are coming forward now going, hey, I know I wasn't crazy. Good. I'm not crazy. Thank you. But one of them had the list of names of the government men that interrogated him, because his father wrote down all the men who came to their house to talk to them. And I was intrigued. I'm like, all right, I can Freedom of Information Act these guys and see if I can find family and figure out what departments they were working for and why it was written off as just helicopters. Maybe there was a deathbed confession or something that I could, get lucky with. And the guy pulls out this old, address book / phone book / recipes, the usual thing the family's always kept. And yellowed pages, and we go back to that day and there's the names. and it was a lieutenant from the Coast Guard, a pretty common name. So I haven't gotten lucky with that one yet, but it was Coast Guard, so I think it's a little less common. Then there was an Army Air Guard guy, so it's like, okay, that could be Air Force, could be Army. I'll have to. I've been digging on those names and still haven't found anything. But the third name was the name that gave me goosebumps, and it just said "Government Man." Cold.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, if you guys know your UFO stuff, it's like, wait a minute. So I'm doing the math in my head. This was 6 months after the Derenberger incident.
You're muted, Narco.
Like the temperature of the handshake,
yes,
was cold, and that's all he had to remark.
That was the name.
Wow.
The Government Man Cold.
Wow.
So I asked the kid immediately, who's now in his 70s. I'm like, when you were a kid, what do you remember this guy? And he said, yeah, he just stood there in a suit, just kept smiling at me. And so immediately, smiling man injured cold is immediately in my head. And I
just got the chills too.
You've got to let me publish this. You've got to let me tell people about this. And he didn't know who Injured Cold was, had no idea, and I had to explain to him what it was and had to explain to him how important this paper was. And bam, so suddenly I'm on a roller coaster of back to my childhood stories of Mothman and Injured Cold and Flatwoods Monster. And whoa.
The interesting part about Florida, right? Because you mentioned the Tic Tac videos, is that near Jacksonville, I don't know if you know Chaz the Dead, where he talks about the Bet Sphere.
Yes.
Well, it's near where this Bet Sphere in Jacksonville was at. And if you really look at the footage, it could have been, and for those that don't know, it's like this family found this sphere. It came out of nowhere, and the sphere would move around on its own. So the idea being, you can connect the Tic Tac video to the sphere, where if it's flying around in the air, if you get footage of it going fast enough, it could warp into some sort of Tic Tac and move around. Yep. But the government was involved, the Air Force, whoever was involved, and it's this sphere that this family found for the longest time in Jacksonville, and that just blew my mind when I made that connection. But can you you said you're coming out with a new book, but it's of tale.
Appalachia came out last August. Yeah.
Oh, last August?
Yeah, last August. And again, it started because of that Injured Cold story. And then suddenly, a little bit later, I discovered there's a Tampa tie where some planes were scrambled in Tampa and there was an accident of some sort where 2 pilots lose their lives in Tampa coming out of MacDill the same day as the Flatwoods incident. So that led on that trail. So suddenly I'm like, hey, my next Florida book's going to have a chapter on Ohio and West Virginia and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And they're like, just do that book, Mark. We know you want to do it. So
nice.
Let me do that one before our next one next year, which will go back to Florida a little bit. So,
and this is some articles from the Bet Sphere. Is mysterious metal sphere a bug from outer space? And this is like a whole rabbit hole. And Chaz of the Dead, shout out to him. We've talked about it on my show before, where it's this thing where nobody knows what it was and it disappeared one day, right?
Yeah.
But it would move around on its own and all that craziness. And this was in Jacksonville. So who knows? And
it disappeared in the end.
Yeah,
it disappeared, bro.
It's gone.
They have no idea where.
Another one of those was the Amazing Randy. That was one of the first ones he was trying to get his hands on. And, because he wanted to debunk it. He was convinced it was just the old magician's trick with the crystal ball, moving it around and, on a wire that you just can't see. And, but he couldn't get it.
They studied it and they couldn't.
He could never get his hands on it. The 3 people who said they had it didn't have it anymore. They said they had given it to someone to study and it never came back. So
I've heard, I'm sure you guys both know, they tried to say it was a stainless steel ball bearing.
Yeah, from like a military project or something.
That fell out of a truck. That they say they debunked it, hands down debunked.
Yeah.
Because they found the old delivery driver who admitted that, oh yeah, a box fell out, but I thought I got them all, and or I just didn't report it, but now I am. And
Yeah.
if you want to believe that, maybe. But what do you think it is? Do you have any angles on that?
Again, I think we when we look into this stuff, I like to think that just like where we think Disney knows a little more than they let on, I like to think our government knows a little more than they let on. Not necessarily aliens, not necessarily, I think we're now learning that quantum reality are there's maybe parallel universes, there may be all these other things. And definitely other dimensions will probably be easier to access than getting to Alpha Centauri, because certainly less energy is going to be required for that and all that. So maybe these are things, that we're dealing with. And you love to throw science into these things where, we're realizing time isn't linear, time loops, and that really is being proven. The more we discover about space, the more we discover about time, and we're starting to realize some of this stuff is just stuff we don't understand yet. I really love Shirley Jackson, Haunting of Hill House. It's preternatural. It's stuff we don't understand yet. Someday we will. And I like to think we're kept in the dark on a lot of these things for reasons. But I also think, and that's not necessarily a good thing, but that's also, the old Men in Black quote, right? A person is smart, but people are scared, and that I kind of agree with that too. I don't know. It's just all new science. Every generation, the science of one generation makes, either something more bogus or more true. Look at chiropractic medicine. A lot of medical schools won't teach it because they say it's bogus. It's voodoo, but people get relief from it. It helps people. So acupuncture.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Help. Some people really, they can't live without it.
Yeah.
Look at what we're learning about. THCs and all these other things that were voodoo, and we weren't allowed to do any of that, but now we have medical marijuana now. So these are things that even just decades not within this century, look at all the things that have we've discovered are true, and we're still changing history. We're like, oh wait, these people were here longer than we thought. We thought these people were we thought we were about 5,000 years old. Guess what, we're maybe 15,000-20,000 years old. Lemuria, Mu, Atlantis, these things could have existed, and we thought they were just folk tales, and now we're like, wait a minute, we think we found pieces of them. It's like, I think every few years we get on that cusp and things start changing and breaking, and we're at that next cusp soon. I hope. I'd like to see it in my lifetime, but if I don't, at least I've salvaged a few stories for some people, and documented a few things that might have been lost to history. So
well put. So you've got to smoke weed to learn the answers about.
There you go. No,
the Bet Sphere.
I am not a doctor. I am an author. So
take a stop at Lemuria along the way.
He didn't say that.
I have epilepsy, so all I have is epilepsy meds. I can't drink. I can't do any of the fun stuff because the epilepsy meds keep me healthy.
So just teasing. That was well put.
Yeah, that was awesome. And I don't know, we can go to the chat. If the chat wants to start asking some questions, put it in all caps. If you want us to read your question, we'll pop it up on the screen, and we'll do the last 30 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever, on questions, depending on what we get. So if you want to start asking Mark some questions, do you want to plug your stuff, Mark?
Oh, yeah.
Where people can find you, where they can find your book, and I'll post all the
You can find our
links.
books in fine bookstores everywhere. They are also available in every Cracker Barrel and Walgreens in the state of Florida. But with Eerie Appalachia, hopefully it'll go all the way up the Appalachian Trail. But you can also order from eerieflorida.com, and that comes straight to my lovely wife and me, and she will draw something amazing in it. And then okay, so all right, Gothicus. I started when what did we start with? I was talking about the haunted house, and
no, we started with the gnomes. If we we're gonna go.
Yeah, then that went to the haunted house, and then so
awesome. Yeah, I'll post all your links in the description when I post this on the RSS feed. We are live on YouTube right now, and yeah, I don't know. We have 465 people watching, and that's the only question we got. Come on, people. Let's see.
Yeah, all caps for your question, guys. If you want to throw your question in all caps.
All right. Yeah, this is what I wanted to ask you actually about this. If there was any other similar stories of homunculi in Florida.
Okay, so we've got, like I said, Florida can't have nice things. So it's tricky. You have to kind of, dig through the names to figure these things out. So are you guys familiar with like what's more common up north called the Puckwudgies? Have you heard of those?
No.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. They're
No.
like small Bigfoot, basically, 2-3 foot tall, maybe smaller. And in Florida, because we love to name things, we have in the town of Two Egg, which is a great name for a town in Florida. They have a beast there called the Two-Egg Stump Jumper. And it is considered a small, hairy man or creature that jumps from tree to tree. So he's called the stump jumper. And he's incredibly fast, like so fast he almost teleports. And he's been seen many, many times for hundreds of years, all the way back to settler days, but all the way up to recent sightings. People still see him. And then they start realizing, oh, there's multiple of him. He's not just one. There's 2 or 3. So is it a clan? Is it but that is one of the ones that we think now is possibly a gnome sighting or something like that, or definitely homunculi. I like how you call them that. I think that's actually very cool.
That's my own thing, the homunculus. I just link everything. If it's small and little and looks like a man, homunculus right off the bat. Like Narco Longo is a homunculus, believe it or not. And he does a good job at hiding it. Yes.
He's just living in a dollhouse, and that's just all those really intricate little things behind him there. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's some others that I've chased the legends of. There's a group called the Squallies down in the Everglades area. If you've been out there, you may have heard of them. But they tend to be more like pig-headed, like almost like a tribal too, where they wear loincloths and carry spears. And they were very common in the 40s. And then suddenly the military show up and start commandeering and making secret bases out in the Everglades. And then they all suddenly disappear, like they were wiped out. But then in the 50s, 60s, they start coming back and they're bigger. They're like, 4 or 5 foot tall. So that seems to be, well, did they grow up? But and then of course in the 2000s there's the Seminole Boar Man, who's a giant 8 foot tall pig-headed guy, and people are like, oh, it's just them. They grew up, they got bigger. they were government experimented on, and that's why they're so big now.
Yeah, I've heard about that. The pigmen of the Everglades. It's a out of control genetic experiment that they were doing on people, and there's people who literally live. There are houses out in the middle of the Everglades, so
off the grid. Yeah, and it's still, that's where we forced the tribes to live. So there's still a lot of tribal reservations under here because we were like, this land's terrible, so put the natives there. We don't want it, and that's where we kept sending them all. So,
and this question, is Mark aware of the Saxor stones? He was not, because we did ask him before we started the episode. We did ask him that.
It was a new one on me. So and this is Mr. Eerie, Florida. That was good to hear. So I always love the new ones. So.
This is a fun one.
I'll be digging into it.
Is Tampa Bay blessed by ancients to avoid storms?
All right, depends on who you ask. So Sarasota, which is named after Sarah de Sota, the daughter of Hernando de Sota. Supposedly she's buried out there being protected by tribal spirits, and that's why Sarasota doesn't get hit by hurricanes.
Interesting.
And that was in my book, Eerie, Florida. But in Freaky, Florida, we delve into the shaman of Felipe Park, depending. And that it was a native mound there at north of Tampa Bay and Safety Harbor. And they say that there's a shaman that walks up that mound every day and summons an earth elemental to fight the storm gods. And that's why we have so much lightning in our area, but he also steers the storms away. And then, of course, there's Minnie Lightning, the voodoo queen of St. Petersburg, also known as Minnie Lights, and her Gator Boys. And they steer the storms to attack Marie Laveau because she hates Marie Laveau. So she steers the storms away from us to New Orleans. But her story is super dark. And the real story behind that is so much scarier than a voodoo queen legend. So we'll do that another time. So,
and I don't know what this is. What do you know about the area surrounding
Eglin Air Force Base, Fort Walton? That's also Pensacola Naval Base. That's all right up there in the Panhandle. Gulf Breeze UFOs were spotted in that same area for dozens of years. Of course, Ed Walters is the most famous guy who took all those amazing photos of them and then he was later debunked when he moved out of his house and they found the model kit in his attic. So he had done double exposure shots to do this stuff, but that still doesn't explain the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other sightings and things. He just was taking advantage of it.
Right.
He still says he was framed by the government and that he wouldn't have been stupid enough to leave the model, but we've pretty much proven over the years that he was totally bogus. The next question, any Thunderbird stories? Yes. Plenty. Lots of Thunderbirds. And a lot of them could be people don't know what a cormorant is. And they look like flying gargoyles. They almost look like pterodactyls in flight when you see them. You'll see them out where they're sunning their wings on rocks, and they get pretty dang big. And so a lot of the sightings, I think, are those. But that said, there are still other sightings that, could be something else. No, it's definitely reptilian. Okay.
Well,
cormorant.
The sandhill crane.
Yes.
Is so unique to some people that had never seen it before. A lot of people, there was a myth that they didn't fly because they let you get so close a lot of the time that they don't fly away like other birds because they know they can mess you up with their bills. So that's
common. Like when I started doing Mothman research for Appalachia, they're like, oh, it's a sandhill crane. It was misidentified. And then, the Flatwoods monster was a sandhill crane. It's almost the swamp gas, or the weather balloon is the sandhill crane, so I do, it could be. Some of these probably were, and that's, especially the one, there's a famous sighting. You were talking about Coral Castle earlier. There's a famous sighting of a Thunderbird over Coral Castle.
Really?
We're pretty sure that was a crane, but because of the timing, it would have timed in with their migratory, but some of these sightings definitely would not be during their migration periods. So.
And wood storks, when they're pointing forward all the way in flight with that long beak, some people from up north might catch that the wrong angle and see them gliding instead of flapping. And I'm not trying to shoot any of this down. Of course, I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Again, we want to know. Yeah, we want to know. It's stuff we don't understand. And hopefully all these sightings could be easily chucked away, and that's 100%. But they could also be something we don't know.
Yeah, Narco Longo does not believe in Bigfoot, so
I do. That's not whatever. Okay.
I like this one. Something that you witnessed with your own two eyes. I mean, you have your Bigfoot sighting, but you have anything in Florida?
In Florida, all right, I've got two ghosts that I can definitely say. The one is even on YouTube. I was taking some YouTubers, they're travel vloggers, Tampa J and Chris the Girl. You can Google them up, and they do travel vlogs where they go to theme parks and they go to cons and stuff like that, and just and show and go and show you the things that you can't see if you're not here in Florida. And I was taking them to a very haunted location called the May Stringer House. It's in Brooksville, and they were doing a haunted attraction in their haunted house. This is considered by many paranormal teams to be one of the most haunted locations in America. And there's a waiting list to get on their research things. And they do this to try to save, the building. They use this for money raising and stuff. It's a museum now, but they also do these events. And so we were there, and we were getting a sneak preview of the haunted house the week before they were going to do it. So it was pretty cool. There were some haunted actors and there was some other stuff, but there was basically 4 people in the building with us. And while we were there, this was just before last Halloween. So while we were there, this, weird stuff was, we were going through, and we went through the house, and then all the docents and everybody else left. And I asked permission because I'm a friend of the museum, I said, can I just take them in so we can show them some of the history stuff? And we can go back upstairs and we can document some of the real history of this place. And we go to Jessie May's room, which is a little girl ghost. We go upstairs to the attic, and there's this ghost up there called Mr. Nasty. And he's, isn't that a great name for a ghost? Because they don't know where he's from. He doesn't fit any of the history of the house, but they keep bringing in all these artifacts because it's a history museum. So some of the things are tied to artifacts, and they know this is tied to this actor's trunk.
That'd be Narco's ghost, Dr. Nasty.
Dr. Nasty or Mr. Nasty. And anyway, we were up there and we were all alone in the attic, and we were just recounting some of the stuff that had happened earlier in the night that we were just talking about. And suddenly the attic door just flies open to tell us to go. And there are no all the windows up there are sealed. We're sweating because it's so hot, because it's Florida in October. It might as well be Florida in June. We're dodging falling iguanas now, but takes till December at least. But back then, it's hot. There's no wind. There's nobody else in the house. And I'm sitting there talking, and you just see the door just fly open right behind me. And the poor camera, the girl, Chris, was filming. I just watched her eyes bug out, and Jay is filming and his eyes bug out. And then I turn around and I'm like, I thought somebody had come in. No, it was just us. So we literally got shown the door by a ghost. I don't know how else to.
Whoa.
The door was shut tight. There is no way that we couldn't even get that door, to nudge open, and it would have made a or something like that if it had been anything. But no, it's boom, right open. And so that's on there. If you look up their haunted videos of May Stringer, you'll see them. I think it's about the 30-minute mark on both, or about 25-minute mark on both of them when that just watching the attic. But so that was with my own eyes. And then the other time was in the Cuban Club in Tampa, which is in Ybor City, another notoriously haunted building. And I was there with a film crew that was filming overnight for a news station for Halloween. This is a few years ago. Because of course the news crews all call me at Halloween time, say, "Hey Mark, come tell ghost stories." Of course, book me early. But anyway, we were there and it was overnight, and we'd been telling ghost stories all night. And we were up in the ballroom up on the 4th floor, and I was about to tell the story of the bride who fell to her death off that floor. And it's this famous ghost bride that you can hear walking down the stairs because she didn't want to fall. She wanted to go down to her reception. And you hear it at sunrise, and we were about to go live, and there's 3 of us in the building, the docent, me, and the camera guy, and 4 people, because there was also the reporter, and but we're the only other 3, and those are the 2 not on camera, the cameraman and the docent, and then me and her, and we're about to go live, and he's doing the sound checks, and suddenly we hear the steps going down, something walking down the steps beside us where there's nobody there, and then 3, 2, 1, and you're live. And the poor reporter girl was like, because nothing had happened all night. She was just sad that nothing had happened. And then something did happen. And I'm like, and I was about to say,
you have a recording of it?
The feed starts right then, and right after it. So there is no recording of it. Ask the camera guy. He's like, we're on localized mics. They're meant to cut out extraneous sound.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no recording of it at all, which is sad. But,
interesting. And
there's 2 that I saw my own eyes in Florida.
This has been a popular one as of lately. Dogman. Any reports of Dogman here in Florida?
There's been some recent sightings in the North Florida, up in the Panhandle area, particularly also over kind of towards Jacksonville. There's an old skunk ape legend called the Barden Booger. Again, we can't have nice things. We got to rename them terrible things. But that area where the Barden Booger has been recently Dogman Central. There's been some Dogman sightings in that area. We go into that in Freaky Florida as well, where there was a hunter out there, and he was, getting some wild boar, and he killed it, and he threw it in the back of his truck. And as he's getting in his truck, he sees this big hairy arm reaching in to grab his kill, and he thinks it's got to be a bear. So he comes out and he gets his gun, and immediately he does the classic, whenever you talk about anybody about Dogman, they go, I know I sound crazy, but it looked like a freaking werewolf. Only they don't say freaking, they use the other word. And and it's and he legit, and he literally has given up his career to go hunting and proving that these things exist. So he's still out on the hunt as far as I know. And that was years ago. I haven't heard back from him. I should probably reach out and make sure he's still okay. But he was convinced. That changed his life, that Dogman is real and he wants to prove it. So
nice. Chupacabras or Mothmans? I don't know what that.
Well, flying humanoids like Mothman. Yeah.
Especially Chupacabra. I really want to ask about Chupacabra.
All right. So Chupacabra is mostly known for more Texas, Mexico area,
Puerto
Central
Rico
America.
too, bro.
Yeah, Puerto Rico as well. And so, of course, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and even the other coast, not as much, but Miami had a run of sightings of it for years. And of course, you get everything from the dog with mange to, the giant iguanas, because those are becoming our new invasive species that we all love to talk about. But to be fair, Chupacabra in Florida is one of those. It creeps me out a little bit because the people who see it almost describe it like they're describing skinwalkers or some shape-shifting thing that they do not understand. It's much less lizard creature or mange dog creature. It is much more. Every witness talks about it, starts talking about portals and other poltergeist-like activity happening around it.
Could you go into that?
Huh?
Could you go into that a little?
Yeah, quite a bit. Like a recent person I've been interviewing for our next project. They are a family down in just north of Fort Lauderdale area, and they are a little inland. And they've had, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say exactly where, so I'm going to keep this kind of vague, but they had some of their dogs go missing, and they grew racing dogs, up until dog racing was banned. So they have a lot of greyhounds, and a lot of them were going missing, and they would find blood in the area, and like large amounts of blood, but no bodies, no nothing. So they were convinced they had coyotes or, something was coming out of the swampy area near them and digging these things away. And then the son comes out one night and sees what he called a chupacabra, that he had seen them on people's drawings of them. He'd heard the legends of them. So he was internet savvy and, about them. And he's like, oh my God, this is a chupacabra. And he's runs to get his family. But when they come back, it's, the three dogs' bodies are gone. The carcasses have just disappeared. Wow. And, but what is there is this weird set of tracks that as they followed the tracks, they go from dog looking, but not even dog. They said it looked more like alligator, but small, like a small alligator. But then they turn into almost human. So, and then they just stop. The tracks just stop, and there's like a line in the sand, like it walked through something. So that's their story. Again, they no longer raise dogs, but they
you said like an alligator, but smaller.
Yeah, like a small alligator or dog print. They couldn't tell. They took some photos, and if you look at the photos, it's muddy as hell. So it's like hard to really tell. These were not, investigators or anything with plaster kits or anything. They were literally a family just trying to figure out what was killing their dogs.
Monitor lizards.
That's that could happen. I have a pet Savannah monitor. He's pretty big, and Claudius the Wonder Lizard. He's currently hiding because it's 40 degrees outside.
I saw that on your Instagram.
Yeah,
that's funny because most people say chupacabras kind of look like greyhounds.
Exactly, right. And that's why maybe it was it attracted to it because maybe thought mates.
I didn't even think about that. Like it's
maybe that's why it was letting them loose. Maybe the cutting is from getting them out of the fence or something. So it's crazy story. And now that farm now raises horses, and they still have weird things.
And I grew up
there, so.
I grew up with the chupacabra being this sort of alien thing, and I grew up in Puerto Rico. So as a kid, I would hear stories of friends of my dad that would have ranches, and all their animals would be sucked dry of the blood. But it wasn't a dog. That was like, it wasn't like a canine. This was after. But I remember stories of people. We have shutters on the island of this 5-fingered clawed hand going in and trying to grab people. I remember another place where my uncle used to live, where this thing almost like punched this concrete wall that they had in the back, and it left like this big indentation in the concrete wall. And I heard stories of when my dad's friends would go out and, you know, wait all night and with guns in hand, you know, with rifles in hand to catch this thing. So I grew up with those sort of stories, but to me it was more like an alien thing with like the spine going down its back, crazy,
like a reptilian type
reptilian
thing.
And the lore was that it was an out of control military experiment on something that got loose in the Puerto Rican rainforest. So I don't know if you've ever been through the Puerto Rican. There's actually a tower there too, by the way, Narco, and it's very freaky. And I've walked through it by myself before, and again, there's like somebody's watching. You know, there's something behind peeking through.
I get that feeling. You know, I always try to describe Florida for people who are like, oh, it's, you know, theme parks and beaches, and it's like, if you look at Florida from space at night, because we're the space coast, right? We're launching everything up to space. You know, if you look at it from at night when they're flying up, you look down, you see all those bright lights all along the beaches. Everywhere is bright lights except for up Apalachicola, Big Bend area. But for some reason, we don't build there. And because that's where Tate's Hell is. There's a lot of other more devil stuff. You know, you gotta love that. It's the forgotten coast. But you know, but anyway, you know, that's super bright. Then you go a little further inland, and you get the big bright lights. And that's, you know, that's Jacksonville, Miami, all the cities that support the beaches, right? Tampa, you know, all that. And then you go a little further inland, and it gets a little darker, but you still got a lot of bright lights. That's the sprawl, the suburbs that are supporting the big cities. You go a little further inland, and the lights start getting dimmer and dimmer and fewer and farther between. And then there's the black spots, the Everglades, you know, the Ocala National Forest, the Green Swamp, Mayaca, you know, Pensacola, Tate's Hell, you know, all that near Eglin Air Force Base. And all those areas completely black. Nothing, you know, just little pinpricks of light. And that's where this weird stuff just seems to congregate. It's right on the edges of, and we're slowly building in. That's areas are getting smaller and smaller. And that's why I think, you know, if there are things hiding in there, yes, they're getting shaken up. They're coming out. That's why we're seeing them more and why we're hearing things more. And I think that's all over, but there especially.
That's great. Any legends on horseshoe crabs?
Horseshoe crabs. I mean, there's some folk tales on them. I haven't heard of like any cryptid.
Because you know they have that statue in, I think it's Florida, west coast of Florida, where they have giant horseshoe crabs built onto the beach. They're like fake model horseshoe crabs, but they're giant, like way bigger than we're told horseshoe crabs can get. Yep. There you go.
I think
this is in Ohio.
That's in Ohio. Yeah, I was about to say.
Okay.
I've been to that one.
No, there's some on the beach in Florida that are really big.
Yeah. No, there are native folk tales of them that they are, you know, the reason they're shelled is is because they were great hunters at one point I
saw this one. This is pretty awesome.
Oh yeah.
That's a lobster.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I've seen it, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all good. They're all, but no, not that I really can think of for that. Sorry, gang.
That's all right. No sweat. What about like the blood? Do you know about? Okay, here's a good one. Here's a question from me. What do you know about Maya in Florida? The Maya in Florida. Evidence of the Maya. We've been trying to get Gary Daniels on the show from what's his name? What's his website? Lost World.
Lost World, yeah. There's one of the early stories of Hernando de Soto coming in and, you know, wreaking havoc on all the native tribes and everything that he was doing because he was looking for gold. Got to be gold up here because there was gold down there. It's got to be gold up here too. And he goes to this Timucuan chief named Tomoki, and Tomoki says, "Oh yeah, we have gold. I have a gold cup that is mystical, and we use it to make ourselves invulnerable for war." And DeSoto's like, "Well, you know, show me this." So he's like, "Well, we're only allowed to bring it out when we go to war, and the medicine man, the wise man has to approve it." And he's like, "Oh, okay. So, you know, well, we're gonna destroy your town if you do not, you know, your settlement if you do not show us this." So he goes and grabs it, against the will of, the shaman, who's like, no, you can't do this. And he's like, no, I'm going to show him. And so he drinks from the cup without doing the proper rituals. And he shows him this gold cup, and then he drinks from it. And he's like, I'm impervious to things. Well, then he realizes the folly of his mistake is now DeSoto is gold fever. Obviously you got this from somewhere. So he starts, attacking. And so, but Tomoki, uses the cup and is able to fight him off. But now he's angered all the local tribes and they decide, well, you've brought this upon us and we've got to bring you down. So the shaman turns the magic on him and turns him into this pink incandescent cloud of energy or gas that is poisonous to all, and he melts him. But occasionally that cloud rises and will burn you if you see it and stuff like that. Now, if you look up Tomoka State Park, there is a statue of Chief Tomoka doing that, or Tomoki doing that, holding the cup like a Holy Grail icon. And that was one of the reasons why, the other conquistador, there he is.
Who, Menendez?
Yeah, Menendez starts looking for the Fountain of Youth in that area, thinking he can beat Ponce de Leon, because that must be the Holy Grail or something like that he's got. So, but now more modern scholars think that he had a Mayan relic of some sort, because we now realize they had the trade route. Mm-hmm. They had, they could have, look at Miami Mystery Circle, all comes back, that definitely could be more to this than meets the eye. So,
well, what's your just guys, get your questions in. We've got about 5 minutes or so before I'm gonna hop off. But what's your take on officially? We're told officially that Miami has nothing to do with or the Mayama or the Mayaka.
Yeah.
And they even tell us that the Miami in Florida has absolutely nothing to do with the Miami in Ohio.
Even though we now know they had a trade route.
And it's the same. It's the same mound building culture from there to here.
Yeah, largely. Serpent Mound. I just did a whole big thing on Serpent Mound and Alligator Mound, and how Alligator Mound isn't an alligator. Even though we do know they kind of did talk to them down here, we think Alligator Mound is actually underwater panther or Mishapishu Mound. And, and Serpent Mound is actually Great Serpent Mound, because that's more the Thunderbirds, the Great Serpent, Mishapishu in the waters, that's definitely makes more sense than why would they build an alligator mound? That doesn't look like an alligator, has a head of a panther with horns, has an alligator tail, but that's what the underwater panther has. But anyway, that's another book. Miami, I definitely think had something to do with that. There was a couple of journalists in the 1930s were given letters from a guy who said he had found pyramids in the middle of Corkscrew Marsh, and they went looking for them and never found them. But one of the reporters came back saying, well, they found what they thought was the remains of a pyramid, and they went down underneath and it was filled with snakes, and it was, stone, and they're like stone tunnels. And we've been with a lot of experts through Corkscrew Marsh. That is this amazing place. And it's huge. It's another one of those dark places on the map. And it's where they do a lot of sulfur mining and stuff, and limestone mining and stuff like that. But yeah, it's crazy. Oh, there we go. Anything spooky about the Keys? Oh my gosh, we do a chapter on the Keys in each book, because there is so much on the Keys. It's St. Augustine, Casadega, they've all got to be in each book, because every one of those has something crazy. But the Keys, always, you have to end in the Keys. I was on the recent Travel Channel, Discovery Channel Shocktober documentary, Curse of Robert the Doll. I was the talking head talking about Robert. And nothing is scarier than Robert the Doll. It's, always follow his rules. Like, Robert, we're going to talk about you. I hope it's okay. And you're awesome. And we love you. And he's the most haunted doll in the world.
We love you, Robert.
He's the basis for Chucky. Don't take his picture without permission. Be nice to him. And the big secret is, when you say goodbye, always say goodbye. That's the part people forget. If you don't say goodbye,
Wow.
the connection's still there. And then if you screw up any of those, you got to write him a letter, and he gets literally 100 letters a week of people who didn't believe him and now are apologizing profusely because bad crap went down and they got to deal with it. And so definitely when you go down to Key West, definitely visit Robert. There's also the corpse bride, Elena Demilios, married a lady.
Back to
crazy.
To Robert.
Yeah.
Touch on Robert real quick. Is he the one that's in the fort in Key West?
Yeah,
inside Fort Martello.
Fortis Martello Museum. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's an art museum. They got given this doll. They didn't know what the hell it was, and the doll wanted to be seen, and it would show up in places, and they finally started learning the rules because they had him displayed so long. And cameras don't work around him if you don't ask permission. Okay, well, ask permission. If you don't say goodbye, bad stuff happens. Okay, go say goodbye. So it's there was.
What do you know?
Down there.
I'm gonna ask another one from me. Sorry.
Yeah.
What do you know about the shrunken heads in Florida?
Okay, well,
the shrunken head in St. Augustine, and I knew about that one, but I just got told there was one in Ripley's, believe it or not. Supposedly.
Ripley's has the largest collection of shrunken heads on the planet, and their collection is all in Orlando.
Wow.
Just outside.
I've seen it.
Yeah. Have you been to the warehouse?
On I Drive?
Yeah. Have you been to the warehouse?
No.
They have a bunker that is where they keep all the property for Ripley's around the world. So all the Madame Tussauds, which they also own, are all in this one bunker outside of Orlando, just maybe 30 minutes from I Drive, where their big museum is. And I've been in there a few times. I did a show called Road Trips with Ripley's, and they gave me the tour of the warehouse, which was amazing. And every day they're getting there, they get boxes of stuff. People send them stuff. Well, some lady sent them the longest fingernails in the world, and she'd had them for her whole life and finally cut them off, sent them to Ripley's. But the shrunken heads, they have Hemingway. Speaking of Hemingway, they have Hemingway's shrunken torso, which was a whole head and torso, which is very rare. They have that in the one in Orlando on display currently. So, and they rotate displays all the time. So,
is that the man?
Hang on, what? Hemingway had a shrunken head.
Hemingway owned a bunch of shrunken heads himself, but he also had one that was a torso. So it's like chest up to head. And that one's on display right now. It's super rare. But yeah, if you ever go in that warehouse, you want to talk about weird feelings, because there's a whole section of nothing but shrunken heads in boxes.
Let's go there, dude. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, we gotta go.
What
do you think the shrunken? Where are they from officially?
Different places, usually
Africa?
Papua New Guinea area, mostly the Philippines, usually islands, but some from Africa. Some Ripley got them from all over, and a lot of them were fake, but a lot of them are real. So it's pretty crazy. So there's the Hemingway torso.
Wow.
Yep.
Now, do you think these are actual shrunken torsos, or do you think, or people, or do you think,
it's right there.
Do you think they're people that are naturally small, just getting mummified?
It's
because how do you shrink a skull? It just doesn't.
That's supposedly a medicine man tradition, or and all this. It's some secret recipe that does it, but we've seen it happen naturally, and we still don't know. Like the lady who melted in St. Petersburg in the 60s, her skull shrank super tiny.
Wait, who melted?
Yeah, the
he's pulling out stories out the wazoo, bro.
Oh, dude, you guys had me on, so but in Eerie, Florida, we talk on page, but no, there was a lady that literally was old lady. She went to bed one night after having dinner with her son. The next day, they come in, and the guy's delivering a package. He can't open the door. He realizes it's hot. Oh, it's fire! So he calls the police. And the fire show up. They bust down the door. Her chair where she was sitting in the room is incinerated. All that's left is her foot, a pile of goo, and a shrunken skull and these little dark things. And what is all that? What is all that? And it's like the dark little bits are her teeth. They had shrunken so small and shot out like popcorn. And they call her the Cinder Lady.
God.
Spontaneous combustion, right?
This was
Spontaneous
St. Peter's,
combustion was the
St.
original
Petersburg.
theory. Candling became a theory where, because she may have been smoking a cigarette, used her own body as wax. But either way, she had to burn about 4,000 degrees for a couple hours to shrink as much as she did and all that. So the fact that the whole house didn't burn down is a miracle. Yeah. There she is, Mary Reeser. Yep. And the pictures are crazy. So, but her file is at the St. Pete History Museum, and her FBI file, and it's signed by J. Edgar Hoover. And the guy who did it said, who did the exploration of it, said if he had didn't believe in dark magic or had believed in dark magic, he would have put that down as the reason, because it just did not make sense to him.
Yeah, I'm not gonna pull up the other pictures because they're kind of gory.
They're gross. They're gross. Definitely not.
Holy shit! So what the hell?
That's what happens when you melt, people. Google
And you're
Mary
saying,
Reeser and you'll see what's left of you. So
did I hear that right? You said like the walls and stuff were not damaged.
There were some damage around her, but didn't spread very far.
Yeah, but it wasn't
that much heat. Why did the whole building not explode?
It wasn't a flame, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but also, like the table next to her was just slightly melted. The clock stopped at 4:20, which hey, blazing up.
Hey.
Yeah, but but that's
really?
Other things. So
that's insane.
That's wild, Mark.
Yep.
You killed it today, bro.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, gang. So
yeah, we have to have you back on sometime.
Yeah,
for sure.
Glad
we could talk about what was it, the up north. I know you wanted to talk about that a little bit, but we can talk about it next time.
Yeah, we can talk about a lot of things up north. We'll do Appalachia on the next one. So
all right,
awesome.
So guys, before we sign off, everyone that's following me, if you're looking for a gift, if you're looking for a late Christmas gift, late, go get one of Mark Muncy's books. You've got Eerie Florida, Creepy Florida. What were the other two?
And
Creepy Florida. Freaky Florida.
And Eerie Appalachia. So
Eerie Appalachia. So we had Eerie Florida here in the store. It's sold out. We're going to be stocked up soon. But
and get to my wife's lovely art. It's
and hopefully we'll get him in here for a book signing or something.
Heck yeah.
And we'll also maybe next Halloween work something out around Halloween season. That'd be cool. We're only in West Palm.
Oh yeah, not too far. Not too far.
I'm always in Tampa Bay. Too.
Yep.
So
and we can also find us. I did a local television show here in Tampa Bay called Eerie Travels, and they put the first season up on YouTube. So if you didn't see it on that local channel, you can find that on YouTube. Just look up Eerie Travels, or if you go to Eerie Florida or EerieTravels.com, you'll find it too. So,
and they can get your book on your website directly too.
You can get it directly from us. You can also get it from anywhere fine books are sold, including the Evil A. But you can get us just about anywhere. And we're in every CVS and Walgreens in the state, I think.
Really?
And I know we're in Cracker Barrel because I'm Cracker Barrel famous.
Of course.
Nice.
You know you made it as an author when you're on Cracker Barrel. So.
Well, that was it, ladies and gentlemen. Mark Muncy. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us here on Coquina Cowboys with myself and Dr. Narco Longo. Everyone, make sure to follow him. You got Instagram at Eerie Florida. Make sure to follow me at the 101 Podcast and old_world_Florida for Narco Longo. Make sure to check us out on there and hit like, subscribe, share this video with your family. And this was awesome, Mark. Thank you so much for coming on again, man.
Thanks again, guys. And you all have a happy new year. And we'll see you on the other side, as we used to say at the haunted house.
And stay, yeah, for sure. I always say that too. Thank you, guys. I'm gonna be leaving. Goodbye.
Thanks, Mark. Have a good night.